Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys.
And I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything from the Pistons to the NBA draft and the Motor City Cruise.
And we are absolutely pumped today to be joined by our guy, friend of the show, one of the original hosts from back in the day with DBB Live, our guy, Jack Kelly from Pistons Intellect. Jack, how have you been, man?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's cool to think. I think it was about a year ago I was on the show with you, Wes. So man, I always love jumping back on and talking with you guys.
Yeah, and just before we even get going today, because guys, we did get a ton of questions, so we're pretty much just going to hop in and try to cover as many as we can. But I wanted to give you, Jack, a chance just to talk about any content or things people could watch for on the YouTube channel that you got planned for this season.
Well, I've actually got some pretty big changes coming, which I'll announce in the next few weeks, just mainly to do with my life, which will significantly impact the channel and my Pistons content. So, yeah,
I'm excited.
Dropping some Easter eggs. All right, cool. Yeah, we'll watch for that.
But I'm pretty excited about it. But yeah, you can just follow me over at Pistons Intellect on YouTube.
And I have to say, Jack, you have a new Twitter username too. I saw Pistons Jack pop up on the timeline, and I was like, okay, there cannot be another Pistons Jack besides Jack Kelly. And I clicked on it, and I was happy to see it was you. So almost had to figure something out there, but no, I thought it was cool.
Yeah, no, so that might be a part of something. So yeah, we'll
we're putting things together.
Might have exposed some things, but yeah.
we're stringing it along. Hang on though. I didn't think you could change that. Isn't that didn't Twitter not let you change that? Is this new?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I've never thought to change it in the past few years, and then I just I made some changes. It was actually really easy to do. So yeah.
I don't know, Blake, shed some light. I know you're a blue subscriber, so I feel like you know everything about Twitter.
Yeah, I did that once.
Sorry, X, Mr. Subscriber.
Apparently you can't DM people that you don't follow, or essentially DMs get closed if you don't subscribe. And I was trying to interview someone, so I was like, all right, Elon, I'll pay your stupid $10 a month, and then I just never gave it up. I don't know. I think you can change obviously you can, but yeah, I have my name and nothing else, so I would never give it up, just because hopefully there's not another Blake Silverman out there listening that's waiting for that to happen. But I'm I just can't give that up at this point. And I'm sure there are a ton of Jack Kellys too, but only one Pistons Jack. So
it was
look, if there are if I was just to say, if there are other Blake Silvermans, I mean, we got bad news for him. You're the OG, at least as far as Twitter is concerned. Last little bit of news that we got to get out of the way first. Blake, I'm wondering how excited you are about the Woj news. I'm just going to let you explain it and your connection to it all. We got to get your thoughts on this. I've been waiting all day.
Yeah, so Adrian Wojnarowski obviously hit us with his last Woj bomb of his career as a newsman, ESPN senior NBA insider. He announced he was making a life change, doing something else, focusing on his family. And he also, when I read through it, his last line, his announcement was so impeccably written, which you don't expect anything else. But the last line was after years of reporting on everyone else's teams, I'm heading back to my own. I thought that was a great line. I was yep, he's spending more time with his family. And then shortly after, I think it was Adam Schefter tweeted out that he agreed to be the general manager of St. Bonaventure men's basketball program, which I am alum of St. Bonaventure. I connected with Woj briefly, through that. He talked to some of my classes, and I followed up with him to thank him after, and he responded, which I was Woj, you probably have much more important things to do. But yeah, just so a great cool guy. Yeah, everyone that worked with him, had connections to him, was sharing a ton of crazy stories. Zach Lowe had a great story on his podcast. I'm sure a bunch of people listen to Lowe Post, so check that out. But Yeah, I'm a St. Bonaventure basketball fan, so I can't say I wasn't thrilled when I saw the news. I mean, you can't, like, him going into that role is something that money can't buy with his connections and everything. And we're a small school, so it just does. Like, I heard a story that our team just with the transfer portal, we get a new roster like every year now, basically. And I heard a story that one of the new guys that's on the team last year or next year, he's a big Chicago Bulls fan and particularly Kobe White fan, and Woj like connected him. And I think they got to work out together or something like that. So things like that. And Woj just like loves the school so much. It's just like the perfect dream job for him and something he thinks will really fulfill him. And I don't doubt it at all. Huge loss for the NBA community, but personally, I am pretty happy. It's going to like my niche team that I'm a fan of as well.
That's
and
so
thank you,
cool.
Wes, for letting me get on my soapbox for a minute.
No,
Yeah.
that's a cool story ever. I love that story. I didn't know you had any of those interactions. Like I assume maybe there could have been something, but that's so cool to hear.
Yeah, one of just to tie it to the Pistons, there was one day when I had a class and Woj was speaking to it, and it was actually a few months ago. It was like the day when the Pistons did a bunch of those like two-way transactions when they gave a two-way to like Buddy Boeheim and stuff. And so I mentioned that. I think I put up a story on DBB about it, and he was like, oh yeah, like Blake, I remember you, like I see your stuff, you're doing a great job or something. And I was like, if you told me that like Woj would say that when I was filling out my application to go to that school like years ago, would not have believed you. So he's just like a genuine person, and I could not be happier for him to like do something that he loves to do after really like getting to the mountaintop and the pinnacle of his craft. So huge loss again for the NBA community, but he'll do great things in what he's moving on to.
The only sad part of that whole announcement was that I had to turn off the notifications for Woj. And like Woj was my guy. I was very much team Woj over team Shams. So like having to get rid of that notification, it's like, bittersweet. Happy for him. Obviously happy for you with the whole connection with the Bonnies. And then I'm like, but sad for me.
Yeah, I actually realized, and Woj would break like when St. Bonaventure would get a transfer, he would tweet about it, and I would always laugh at the people who had his notifications on that are like, what is this? But yeah, I realize I'm in like the 0.1% of people who probably still will have those notifications on. So yeah, it's crazy. It's a total paradigm shift in NBA media.
All right, let's get to some of these questions. We'll get to this first one here from Peter Verb. Says, what do you guys think about the JB Bickerstaff interview with Richard Jefferson on his podcast? He says that he likes the parts about Jalen Duren and his growth potential the best. So, Jack, throw it to you right away, man. What do you think about that podcast, you two, Blake, and I guess Jalen Duren and his potential as well?
Yeah, I think the stuff about Duren was cool, but I think I listened to this podcast like a month ago now, so I'm just recounting it in my head. But I think the biggest takeaway from that was just JB, and I know this sounds silly, but after a season of Monty Williams, like just hearing him reaffirm like his commitment to the job, he's like excited to be there, ready to turn this around. That's stuff that should be a baseline, but just hearing him kind of reaffirm that, talk a bit about Cade, talk a bit about Jalen Duren, and kind of maybe his potential, and like they spoke about the normal stuff with Duren, like just about his physicality and size. Like I didn't find it like anything like overly suggestive of like what we can expect from Duren this season. But I think just the commitment to being in Detroit and, taking the job and moving this program to like a respectable level was probably my main takeaway from it.
Yeah, that was the same for me too. I mean, the stuff about Duren, it was cool too, because I think when JB was asked about Duren, like Richard Jefferson jumped into and was like, oh yeah, Jalen Duren's a beast, stuff like that. But it's just like his athleticism, his potential, and we'll see how he grows off that. But I'm with Jack. This thing that stuck out to me was JB, how he just reaffirmed how much he wanted to be here. He thought he was going to take some time off after he was let go from the Cavs. He mentioned it was just because there weren't many jobs available at that time. So he figured he was going to take a breather, but then he kind of got the itch that coaches get, and it was a good opportunity. He really believed in everything that was happening in Detroit. So that's what stuck out to me too. And I mean, there were a lot of good nuggets for it. Other than the press conferences that JB has done, I don't know if he's done like a public interview and one as long as that. So I'd recommend any Pistons fan go and watch that if they haven't already.
Yeah, and we're coming up on training camp in just a couple of weeks, so he's definitely going to have more media availability as well in the very near future. This one is from Rames in the DBB comments. It says Malik Beasley averaged 19.6 points per game in his 5th season. That's true, obviously, but just confirming it for the question. It says it was a bit of an outlier. He only played 37 games, but the next season he was back at 12.7 points per game. So Rames' question is, are we sure that Malik Beasley is going to be about a 10 to 12 point a game guy for the Pistons next season? Blake, we'll start with you. What do you think?
I think he can be. So when I was thinking about this question initially, what I looked at was, we know Malik Beasley is being brought in to be a 3-point shooter. So just looking at his numbers, last year he made 2.8 threes a game. The season before that, 2.9. And then he was over 3 a game the few seasons before that too. So if even if he regresses from that a little bit, like let's say he doesn't get as many minutes, but he's still making over 2.5 threes a game, like that's 8-9 points a game right there. And then you just need to get to the line or get another bucket. So I don't know. I'm sort of thinking that Malik Beasley's role on this team might be a little bit bigger than we think, just because of the shooting he provides. A lot of it depends on the lineups and everything, but if he can just do what he does shooting the ball, I think he can get up in that range pretty quickly. Where do you see Malik Beasley, Jack?
Honestly, I was going to say exactly what you said. Like the 3-point makes throughout his career kind of have him around 8 to 9 points just from that area of the floor. So, I mean, there'll be nights where he hits 5, there'll be nights where he hits 2 threes, but I think ultimately, like, he's pretty much a guaranteed 10-point average, unless his shot was to like fall off a cliff, which tends to happen with players when they come to Detroit. But I think he's too good of a shooter. Like, if there's one thing he can do, it is shoot high volume, high efficiency on catch and shoot looks. And I think that gets you 8 to 10 points easily. And then it's just about adding another couple of buckets here or there. But I think the big thing for Malik is just the I guess, attention he's going to draw defensively, like spacing wise. You can't leave him open anywhere from 3. So, but you pretty much hit it nail on the head there, Blake.
Yeah, and just to give you guys both a little bit of backup on this, not only was that 19.6 points per game for those 37 games played, and it's actually a little bit more than that because the season prior he got traded to Minnesota right at the deadline, and he averaged about 20 points a night for those 14 games after the deadline. So he had a good, 50-game stretch here where he averaged almost 20 a night. But not only is that an outlier, that is the only season that, outside of the first 2 years where he wasn't playing enough minutes, this is the only season that he wasn't right around 11 to 13 points per game. Every other year, it's been pretty consistent. His minutes have not gone up and down all that much. Those 50 games that were the outlier, yes, those were stretches where he was a big-time starter for Minnesota. Those were also the only 2 seasons he averaged over 30 minutes a game. So basically all I'm saying, and to back up you guys, is just that for his career, Malik Beasley has been a very efficient 11 to 13 points per game. even last season in Milwaukee, where he was a big time starter and he did average about 29 minutes a game. So he didn't exceed 30 minutes a game, but he still got a ton of volume. I just think it's almost, you could bank it. He's not over 30 yet. There's no reason to think he's going to drop off, and he's been super consistent. So yeah, 10 to 13, I think that's his sweet spot, even if he starts.
Yeah, and when he was traded to the Lakers, like at the deadline the season before, he averaged 11 and only like just below 24 minutes a game. Like he was kind of a spot starter for them, but he, even in those 24 minutes a game, it's not a huge sample size, like just 26 games after he got there, but he put up 7 threes a game. So I don't know. I think it could be there fairly easily. And Jack, like you said, if he is feeling it one night, like he could easily pop for 20, 25, and then that just brings your average up right there.
All right, Jack, let's get talking about your guy, Bobi Klintman. This was kind of an interesting question from Augie28. I think we're going to spin it. So Augie28 from the comments says, was there an option for the Pistons to draft Bronny James over Bobi Klintman? What would have happened? Could they have traded Bronny for Dalton Connect and all these other potential things? But look, Jack, unless you're a massive Bronny James fan, I think we want to focus on Bobi Klintman here. I know he's your guy, NBL dude. Just what was your opinion when they made that draft pick? And then what do you think his role is going to be this season with the Pistons and potentially with the Crews?
Yeah, I think as for the Bronny thing, like I think Bobby's a much better prospect than Bronny James. Like I hope it works out for Bronny, but I think that was never happening. I think the whole Bronny thing, he was always going to the Lakers, or there's that Suns rumor, but that feels like it was just a PR thing maybe. But Bobi Klintman, I think if you watch Summer League, he's a guy that can shoot. Like if there's one thing he did well down in the NBL, it was kind of shoot the ball well. He was a bit inconsistent, but the jumper always looked really clean, really fluid, and you kind of got the sense he was going to be a shooter. I think even was he at Wake Forest before the NBL for a season?
Yeah,
I think even there, like,
and he got some draft buzz after that season, but went to the NBL.
Actually, I remember Bryce really liked him. But
yeah, he did.
And that is like I think he can shoot the ball. He's pretty limited athletically, I would say. But I think the thing that stood out for everyone at the Summer League was just the passing, like the connectivity, some of the creativity with his passing. But like he's just like made some really like nice reads, like in traffic, dropping off bounce passes to I can't remember who was playing the center, but he fed him for some really nice looks in congestion. Like the passing was something I didn't see a whole heap at the NBL. Now, I wasn't dissecting games as much as I do with the Pistons, but I think from a lot of people's perspective that scouted him, like the passing that we saw at Summer League was probably unexpected and a welcome surprise. So I think Bobby's more of a long-term play. I think this season he spent a lot of time in the G League, especially before the trade deadline. Depending on what the Pistons do at the trade deadline, which way they pivot, whether they look to boost their draft stocks or they somehow could be in play-in contention. Maybe he gets some minutes towards the end of the year, or if there's injuries, touch wood. We don't face that, but he could see some minutes regularly if there's some injuries at the 4. But yeah, I think Bobby's much better prospect than Bronny.
Yeah, and what you brought up with the passing is interesting, Jack, because I mean, you know much better than I, but sometimes the roles and when a prospect is going through like the Next Stars program in the NBL are a little bit limited based on their situation. Like that's a really competitive league. These teams are trying to win championships. So sometimes the role is a little finicky there, but I think that lends itself to some of these players that are spending time in the NBL. They come out and maybe show you something they weren't able to show all that often in their pre-draft season in the NBL. And yeah, I mean, we won't touch too much on Bronny anymore, but I will say I did enjoy the whole is a team going to hold Bronny hostage chatter leading up to the draft, and it all worked out how we thought he would. And yeah, rooting for the best, but that was a funny storyline for me leading up to the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, just quickly before we move on, one more Bobi Klintman question for you. Long term, you mentioned he's more of a long run play for the Pistons. I'm kind of, I got the sense from watching his film, and then it was backed up through summer league, that he's long term. You're looking at a guy who's a really big bodied forward. He can shoot and he can do a lot of the little things on both sides of the ball. That's obviously not a superstar, but that's a really effective player. Is that kind of the mold that you envision for him as well, or maybe is there a little leeway in there for potentially more?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like Bobby's spoken about kind of molding his game a little bit off of someone like Tobias Harris. That was actually pre-draft. I think he said that in the interview with Kevin O'Connor, but from the Ring Up. Well, actually, he's changed now as well. Speaking of all these changes in the media, but
yeah, I think Yahoo, right?
Yeah, but
free agency,
with the Ring Up.
Reporter free agency.
Yeah. So, but I think Bobby's going to ultimately, like, if he hits close to his ceiling or in that like 75 percentile higher like range, I think he's going to be like a true four, who can stretch the floor, make some nice reads as a passer, and then defensively, I think he's going to always be a bit challenged there. Like, I just don't think he has the quickness to go with bigger wings, but you never know. You never know. Hopefully he can that can be something maybe he can prove a little bit upon, but maybe he becomes that really savvy defender that draws charges, that kind of thing. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, Wes.
Yeah, absolutely. And since we mentioned the reporter free agency, we'd be remiss not to send a congratulations out to James Edwards III, moving over to the Knicks, right? He's leaving the Detroit Beat, so we're wishing him the best. I will always remember James for having the absolute best food recommendations for downtown Detroit. He was always great for a restaurant or just a place to grab a bite anytime I visited the city. So I appreciate the heck out of him for that. I don't know who I'm going to go to instead. So that's my.
I'll need to get a list off you, Wes, because I'm hoping.
Oh, yeah. I got some I got some ones from him, but they're still pretty good. Omari's good on this too, but James would hit me up a few times with some really good ones, and that was always a lot of fun. So, best of luck to him. Moving on, you guys.
Can I also? I just wanted to mention one quick thing about James. I mean, he's just. We know he was all over the Pistons beat, but he's just like one of the greatest writers. Really, like, I mean, that's where I focus most of my time doing this media stuff. And I mean, all the Pistons fans know, like, James puts out incredible stories. And there was one example specifically that I actually replied to it when he mentioned he was leaving, just because the story sticks in my head. It was about Alec Burks, and James was talking about how he's just a man of few words, but many buckets. And going through it, it was just how Alec Burks like doesn't get a press conference game that much. So when he was up there, he wasn't saying that much. And I just thought James did a great job. Like that's hard, taking a player that's not talking too much and like crafting a story about it and doing it how he did. So great writer. I mean, his career is still on the up and up. So we'll miss him on the Pistons beat, but I'll definitely be reading a lot more about the Knicks now.
Knicks fans, treat that man well. Moving on to the next one. This is from Rames. What are you guys looking forward to in training camp in the preseason? Any early indicators that you'll be eager to see or hear? So, Jack, throw that to you first. What are you looking for as we're really approaching training camp in the preseason?
The first one that came to mind was trying to figure out who the starting lineup is. Like, you know how we get those clips of how like certain players are wearing one colored practice jersey, and trying to figure out if that's a starting
blue
lineup.
Versus white team. Yeah,
that kind of stuff. Like, in terms of like what I want to hear, I'm keen to hear from like Fred Vincent, if we get to hear from him at all, and kind of how like the development of the shooting for Asar and Ron Holland comes. Bearing in mind, like, I don't have high expectations for them this season, but I think it'd just be cool to maybe hear something from him on their shooting progress. But honestly, it's just kind of looking for those clips behind the scenes, like those clips that normally James or Amari would send out. Not that you can take a whole lot from them, but just trying to see, because like I feel like at a lot of these things, like a lot of the messaging is kind of repetitive and pretty stale. Like maybe there'll be some interesting stuff, but it tends to be very similar to previous years in terms of We've got great chemistry. The guys are working hard. So for me, it's just looking out for those little things like who's wearing what color jersey. And ultimately, I don't even know if that means anything in the end, but I have a particular starting group in mind that I know Wes is aligned with me on. So hoping to see them all in the same color jerseys.
Not only is Blake also aligned, but so is Omari and
we gotta change it up somewhere. Just for the sake of discussion.
It's crazy.
But no, I agree with you, Jack. I'm interested to see like the competition too. Like we won't be able to know fully what's going on behind the scenes, but I just think the way the roster is constructed lends itself to some like, I don't know if there will necessarily be positional battles, but I think guys will get tested in camp. Like that was something we thought about when Paul Reed was claimed off waivers. Like, does he eat into Duren or Stu's like minutes or something like that? Just because we think he's the third big, but he might be too good to be a third big. So I'm interested in that storyline specifically. I mean, we're not going to know like the full extent of what happened behind closed doors, but obviously once the season starts and we see the starting lineup, we see the rotations, we might be able to assume some things that happen. And I mean, also preseason too, like I'm sure Ron Holland and Bobi Klintman will get a lot more run than they will in the regular season. So I'm excited to see that too. Just watch them play, see what they can do. Hopefully they can show some flashes, and then we can take some things back that they need to develop as they go into their rookie years.
I think the only thing I'd add to what you guys have both mentioned is if for our Detroit Lions fans, if we remember back to this most recent training camp for the Lions and how players, coaches, and the media talked about Jamison Williams, I would love to get that level of hype out of Cade Cunningham, because look, if this team is going to overachieve this year, it's probably on the back of him. And this is not a good defensive basketball team. So if Cade Cunningham is just dominating training camp coming into the preseason, I think that's a really, really good sign that there's no answer for him. The team can't figure him out. Because, I mean, let's be real. We're probably looking at a bottom 10 defense here with this Pistons roster. So if he's dominating that, I'll feel pretty positive about the season in general heading into the preseason.
Like what happened after Cade was at the select team?
No, nothing like that. That was insane, and I didn't understand it at the time either. That was an example of Twitter hype. What I'm looking for is real hype.
Okay. I like it. Yeah.
Let's hit on this one from Gregory 1988. It says, can you outline the specifics of two-way contracts and the Exhibit 10 deals? Do the Pistons currently have other players signed on two-way contracts or those Exhibit 10 deals? There was a little bit of news on this earlier this week. Blake, I know this is up your wheelhouse, so we'll just toss it to you for the update and explanations.
Yeah, I'll just run through these. Two ways, so I believe nothing's been reported differently that the Pistons have Tosan Iwoma and Dennis Jenkins, who is an undrafted free agent, on two ways. There are 3 two-way spots, but my understanding of it is you need to have a full roster to unlock that final two-way spot. And since the Pistons only have 14 players under standard contract, I believe they're stuck at 2 right now. Not to say that won't change or something could happen. They could switch two ways around or whatever. And yeah, there was a slew of Exhibit 10 deals. And my understanding of what those are is they allow teams to come into training camp with a bigger roster than the regular season. And then most of those players get waived by the Pistons. And then the G League affiliate, the Motor City Cruise, takes them onto their standard roster. So normally it's guys that you want to be in your system. Maybe your G League front office showed interest in them. One of them, Darion Sebron, who he was on a two-way in New Orleans. So I'm sure Trajan Langdon had some influence on that. But other than that, it's just guys that you want in the building on your G League team. Just to run through the other ones, there was Javante McCoy, who the Crews actually acquired in a trade. So he's definitely going to be on the Crews and just be a body in camp. And then there were Devin Higgs and Sam Peake. They were on the Crews last year. And Tolu Smith on an Exhibit 10 as well, which those were reported by our guy Keith Smith, by the way. And Tolu Smith was the center in Summer League that you mentioned earlier, Jack. So just a big body to protect the paint and be down low for the Crews this season. But that's really all there is to it. So I know it gets a little confusing when you see all those names out there. So hopefully I kept track of all of them as accurately as possible, because you'll see those things flying around at this time of year.
While we're on the subject, Jack, I don't think we've had you on since before Summer League. So what were your thoughts on Jenkins on that Summer League team and his performance? I mean, he obviously made some plays, made some mistakes as well, but what was your read on him?
Yeah, from memory, he had a really good 2 first games, particularly game 2. I think he scored was it 26 or something maybe? And I thought for an undrafted guy, it was nice to have someone come in and just be like this unexpected kind of spark plug, to put up 26 at Summer League, where the quality of basketball is it's pretty rough, in the sense of you don't have much time, that you barely play with any of these guys. You probably haven't played with any of these guys, sorry, at all. I thought he looked good. I thought he showed some stuff at both ends. I think he's really good friends from childhood with Marcus Sasser. So that's a cool little tie, I guess. Not that will really affect his career, but there's some chemistry there. So, yeah, I thought, I'm not sure how his NBA career looks, but to have that guy in the G League on a 2-way deal can potentially come up and provide some support, because we do know the Pistons kind of lack ball handling guards. So I think he definitely will play some NBA minutes this year. Where that lies in the season, I'm not sure. But yeah, I thought he was pretty impressive for an undrafted player.
Yeah, showed some effort on defense too. And so, yeah, I think it's just a good guy to have in the building. Yeah, that Marcus Sasser connection is really cool. Jenkins is a Rick Pitino guy too, just for the record. Went with him from Iona to St. John. So great college career and definitely a professional. So we'll see what happens with the 2-way. I think it was a nice UDFA signing.
Well, just, in general, the guard play in the G League is usually really bad. So if he can provide good, stable guard play, that'll be super helpful for guys like Bobi Klintman, who are probably, play some defense, move the ball, make sure guys are getting involved. That's just incredibly helpful for Bobi Klintmans of the world. And, if Ron Holland gets set down for a stretch, Marcus Sasser, any of these guys, even doing injury rehab assignments in practice, right? Because we've seen the Pistons do that before in the past. Not that the guys were playing games, but they were definitely practicing with the Crews. That's helpful for those dudes as well. So, yeah, I thought he played really well. It's a great 2-way pickup, and he could have a really important role even if he doesn't get a single minute on an NBA court. Let's get to this one. This is from @DanielCK It says, based on his past coaching stops, what tactical changes to the offense and defense should we expect to see from a JB Bickerstaff team? I've got some background context and information if you guys want that first. If not, Jack, Blake, feel free to jump in with your initial thoughts.
Wes, you go for it. I know you did the legwork here, so yeah, dive right.
All right. I appreciate it. All right, this was mostly on the offensive side of the ball, but so just in general, doing some stat searching, his Cavs teams were surprisingly not great rebounding and not great disruptive teams. You'd think, especially with having Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, that they'd be near the top of the league in rebounds, blocks, maybe even steals. That wasn't the case. They're in the bottom half of the league all of the past 3 seasons. Each of the past 3 seasons, they were also a bottom 10 offense in terms of points per game. The past 2 seasons, they ran pretty heavy pick and roll, but it was less than what the Pistons did. The Pistons were, I believe, top 5, and the Cavs the past couple of years were about top 10. looking last season specifically, because there were a couple things that popped up as being a bit unique changes that he made to that Cavs team to try and take him to the next level. They were bottom 5 in 2-point field goal attempts, but top 10 in 3-point attempts. Obviously, that 3-point number is one of the biggest changes that they had done. They had been bottom 10 the past 2 seasons. They were also always bottom 10 in two-point field goal attempts as well. So seeing that 3-point number jump up was a big-time change. They were in the bottom half of the league in drives per game. The Pistons, for reference, were in the top 10. However, they got a lot more paint touches. They were top 10 in paint touches. I believe it was 7th or 8th. Pistons were only 13th. So they were much more efficient in that. And then the Pistons averaged nearly 2 more post-ups per game than the Cavs did. So the Pistons last year were at 3.4. The Cavs actually had the second fewest in the NBA, which again, minor surprise when you've got Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, 2 incredibly talented big men out there in Cleveland. They only posted up 1.7 times per game, according at least to NBA.com. So kind of the major takeaways from this is that in general, Bickerstaff teams tend to play a slower pace. They're not incredible at rebounding or being disruptive with their hands on defense. They are much more selective than the Pistons were last season. So they're more selective when it comes to when they do pick and roll and who gets those reps. They're also much more selective on just general drives to the rim, who gets the paint touches. And as well, they seem to be trending towards having that higher 3-point attempt rate and a pretty dang low post-up rate. So there's all the background stats for past few years of JB Bickerstaff's offenses.
That was an amazing recap. Because I honestly was going to struggle to answer this one, but I think those last 2 things you said there, higher 3-point attempts trending upwards, post-ups very low. Both very surprising numbers considering the 2 bigs they have, like you said, Wes, but also very encouraging numbers for Pistons fans because we've seen, I don't know where the Pistons post-up numbers have sat, but I know a lot of frustration has come from post-ups from certain players who might not be on this team anymore, but we also just don't want to see post-ups. Like with the amount of shooting, let's see as many 3-point shots as we can. And I think, Wes, you went through some of the defensive stuff there, but it's going to be really interesting. Like JB, the past 3 seasons, 5th ranked defense, 1st, and then 7th last season in the league. That's per 100 possessions. How does that fit with this roster? Because I think anyone who's kind of paid a bit of attention to the roster and the additions, like defense isn't, based on paper, going to be a strong suit for this team. So how does JB fit with that? It could be a recipe for success, or it could be a very interesting first season for JB managing this roster.
Yeah, I won't add too much here because I thought you guys covered it extremely well. But yeah, I think offensively, I honestly am thinking it might be a bit simplistic and not in like a bad way. I think we might just see with whoever the primary ball handler is on the floor, a quick set action, whether it's a pick and roll, split, whatever it is, and then creating something for someone, and then you're just hooping from there. Like I think one thing that JB has said, and you can kind of pick up from his teams, is he really tried to work with what he had and not, I guess, just go into a strict system or like pigeonhole guys into a certain role. Like with Cleveland, he said he didn't necessarily want to use 2 big lineups, but the lineup or the roster he had was built towards that. So it's a bit ironic, even though he did that in Cleveland. Like I hope we don't really see any 2 big lineups in Detroit, just because we've seen how those don't work for this roster in the past, and the current iteration of the roster really isn't built to it. And then defensively, I think, guys are definitely going to be expected to, like, hopefully there's players on this team that aren't good defenders, but hopefully there isn't anyone that is a net negative, or there isn't anyone that you can just say like, okay, you're going to be a total 0 out there. Like I think effort is going to be expected, or your minutes will go away. So I'm just hoping he meets these guys where they are a ton of different guys at different points in their careers, and just trying to put like Cade especially in the best situation possible, but also everyone else that is on the roster. So I'm hoping we just see some fluidity, and if things aren't working, making a change quickly or just trying new things that we didn't really see last year.
Yeah, I think that flexibility could end up being really huge. That was something that I remember thinking when the hire was made, that, yeah, it hasn't seemed like those Cavs teams really ran anything super complicated, but then at the same time, he was very flexible with the roster that he had. I mean, you just look to what they did last season from the perimeter, right? They really ramped up the Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland usages, really ramped up their three-point attempts. And that wasn't something that he had ever focused on, even going back to those Memphis days. So just that willingness to kind of change and shift with the roster that he had, I think that's a really good sign. And I'm glad you brought it up. And then when it comes to the big men, that was something that when I was going through all of those numbers that I was very surprised by. I was really expecting to see not only, high levels of essentially use for Allen and Mobley because they are so dang talented, but also like not being a big time rebounding team was, I think, a really big surprise to me. Not being a big disruptive team was a really, really big surprise to me. It seems to indicate that, his defenses have been fundamentally extremely sound and very disciplined, very low risk defenses, not trying to make any big plays or over rotate or try to jump any lanes, but just simply trying to not allow points and nothing else, not being an active, but kind of being a defensive defender, if that makes sense. I was really interesting. Yeah. And then one other thing was, so I was looking at that post up number and it got me curious. So I just looked this up. On that Cavs roster, Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley were both basically at a 20% usage rating, which was behind Karis LeVert, obviously the two guards, and Garland and Mitchell, and then Craig Porter Jr. and the minor minutes of Amani Bates. They just weren't featured as much as I kind of thought. For reference, Jalen Duren last year was also at about 19. So yeah, I don't know. It's curious. I just wasn't expecting to see all that.
Yeah, and on the rebounding, like, I think I'm surprised too, because obviously you're featuring those two bigs, but I think a little bit of it is you didn't have great rebounders after that. Like, you didn't have particularly good rebounding guards or wings. Like, yeah, Donovan Mitchell grabbed some rebounds here and there because of his size. Like, Max Strus is okay at it, but I wouldn't be shocked if like the Pistons are a better rebounding team, because you have Jalen Duren, who we know is a great rebounder. Isaiah Stewart is good as well when he's on the floor, but you also have like Asar Thompson, who's a good rebounder, and Tobias, and like Cade grabs rebounds too for his position and things like that. So I think there might be some positional help there, but yeah, I thought that was an interesting point as well.
I do wonder if it has to do with the pace as well. If they're a slower pace, I'm guessing there's less possessions.
Absolutely,
maybe,
could be part of it.
I think Mobley doesn't strike, like, obviously he's quite lengthy and like I think he's like 6'10" or 11, maybe even 7 foot, but he's not. I don't think he's like a big rebounds guy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he does.
No,
8.
I mean, I don't think he's dominant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but that's still very interesting just because of the two big elements.
Shocking again, 9.4 rebounds per game in about 30 minutes a night for Evan Mobley last year. That is also a lot better than I was thinking, because that's where my head was too.
Interesting.
Jarrett Allen was only at 10.5. He's been better than that in the past. Weird year for those bigs out there in Cleveland.
For sure.
They still won a playoff series though.
They did. With big wasn't Garland was out, right? They had a lot of injury issues in the playoffs, I thought.
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't fully remember. I remember it went to 7. That's all I can really remember from it.
And then they did they lose to the Celtics? Is that who knocked them?
Yes. Yep, because the other series was the Knicks and the Pacers. We
yeah, that
definitely
was so fun.
paid close attention to playoff basketball.
I paid attention to the Pacers. That was about the
That
extent of my
was
playoff
I did
basketball.
not think they would take down the Knicks.
No, me either. All right, let's get to this one from username omitted in the DPB comments because I don't want to speak this evil. It says Asar's contract is the type that teams with no flexibility would love to obtain, seeing as he can contribute to winning now and presumably also is pretty cheap, which he is. Would it be slick to trade him for Jonathan Kuminga out of Golden State? So just a little bit on Kuminga, what he did last season. He was 16.1 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists. He slashed 53, 32, and 75, that being from the floor, 3-point line and free throw line, respectively. Not a huge blocks or steals guy, although I say that, but it was comparable to the Pistons bigs last year. 0.7 steals, 0.5 blocks. So not necessarily jumping off the page numbers, but he is still extremely young. He's only 22 coming into this season, and he's about to get paid because this is year 4. So what are you guys' thoughts on Kuminga and I guess potentially trading Asar Thompson for him as well?
So first of all, I think Kuminga is a guy I've been pretty low on, but I think last season he showed maybe he does, like he can be like a pretty good scorer in this league. I think particularly, was it like he post trade deadline? I feel like there's a point in the season where he flipped the switch and he really like put on together some really solid stretches as a scorer. I think though, in terms of this trade proposal, like I think it's a pretty easy no for me. One, because of the contract element. Like I'm not ready to pay someone like Kuminga, especially when Asar's contract, like he's only going into year 2. But I think for me, I think Asar is, the potential is so high with him now. Like him hitting that is going to rely a lot on the jumper and some other things, but he's kind of the guy for me that sits number 2 behind Cade in terms of like, if you wanted to put a pecking order together for the young prospects, like, and it's mainly just based off a lot of potential that he might not even hit, but there's something just about these Thompson twins that just leads me to think they are winning basketball players. And I'm hoping Asar can show some improvements as like a ball handler this season and maybe show flashes of a guy that maybe you can put the ball in his hands to create a little bit with the right lineups around him. But I think you still need to give Asar 2 more seasons before you even before that thought would enter your mind, unless some sort of all-star became available and the trade made sense. But there's just something about those Thompson twins, their athleticism, the defense, like, I'm not giving that up quickly at all.
Yeah, this is a no for me also. I mean, of course, Asar's contract is one that a contending team would love. Like he's still on his rookie deal and everything like that. But you still have to pay him. And like you guys were mentioning, Kuminga is coming up on that extension timeline. But what it comes down to for me is like one, and I mean, it could just end here, but not interested in dealing Asar maybe for anyone right now. I mean, I know if you're making a big trade, like you might have to give up a piece like that, but I don't see the Pistons doing that. The other thing is just Asar's upside is so much greater than Kuminga's right now. I think like Kuminga's entering year 4, hasn't been in the best situation.
All right, we do need to just really quickly. This is from Mr. Jones. It's a good point. Asar is only 3 months younger than Jonathan Kuminga, so they are actually fairly close in terms of age. But Kuminga's been in the league an extra 2 years, right? So there is a difference there developmentally. Anyway, continue. I just want to make sure I threw that in.
Yeah, like I think I'd be interested in bringing in Kuminga for a different trade. I just think it's a matter of not wanting to give up Asar at this point. And I think like Kuminga might I mean, who knows what direction the Warriors are headed now, but it might be a situation where he just needs a new situation to like pop and really thrive. But if you bring Kuminga in right now, are you willing to extend him in the off season? Do you want to let it go into restricted free agency. Like, what do you do with that? And then Asar, like I just don't think you can give up that asset yet that you use for your number 5 pick just a season ago. I mean, there could be trades out there where it could make sense, but this just like isn't the one for me.
I am also a no, but I guess it's for a little bit of a different reason. Honestly, like I think Kuminga has a greater potential of being more of a well-rounded player. Like Jonathan Kuminga has shown so much more offensively as a scorer, as just a guy who can handle volume on that end of the floor than Asar has at probably any point in his very, very competitive basketball career so far. So from OTE to last year. That being said, the two factors that I think are important, in my head, they play the same position. I think these are both fours. They can slide down to the 3 if you really need them to, but you would much rather have them up at that 4, being a super athletic, super strong, extremely bouncy, off-ball forward for you. And then I do think that Asar Thompson can be a little more unique, and I lean, with how young they both are, I lean quite a bit towards gathering uniqueness and seeing if you can make something work. Because what Asar Thompson can give you or not that he can, but it looks like maybe he can in the future. The type of player he could be is, I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago, kind of that like Andre Iguodala, Draymond Green, super utility guy, except he's an incredible athlete. So one of the best defenders in the league, a good passer if he doesn't have to, dribble the ball like 10 times to get to a spot, and just an incredibly disruptive and entertaining fast break player. And I think that that's special. That could be really special. So the potential to have something unique and something special that maybe no one else in the league can even match, I think is pretty exciting, and I would like to invest in it more. So that's why even though Kuminga probably is a safer bet to be well-rounded and a very good player, and in that way might have a higher potential than Asar, I'd like the unique. I like special. I want to invest in that instead. Plus he's cheaper for 2 years.
Yeah, and Kuminga like shoots it okay, but not on tremendous volume. Like, I don't think it's a matter of you're bringing in a guy, like he's definitely a better shooter right now, but it's not like you're bringing in a guy who does similar things that Asar does and also is going to consistently hit like 35% on 4 or 5 threes a game. Like, that's not what Kuminga is.
And he also doesn't have a great history as a free throw shooter. I know he was 75% last year, but the 2 seasons prior were under 70, and that's usually not a great track record for becoming a plus NBA 3-point shooter. If through your formative seasons you can't crack 70 from the stripe.
Yeah.
Jack, any final thoughts on this idea before we move on?
No, I think I like the way you phrased Asar, like unique. Like, he is a unique talent. No question about that. And that's something you want to explore for at least another couple of seasons, in my opinion.
Oh, this is interesting. Mr. Jones in the live comment says, is it unique, talking about Asar Thompson, when Houston has a better carbon copy version of Asar, and that being in the other twin, Amen Thompson? And gosh, all right. So I wonder do you two agree with this? I don't think they're the same player at all.
No.
Amen has far fewer limitations offensively than Asar does. I would not be putting Amen in that type of utility guy role. I think he's a point guard. If not a point guard, then a combo, right? I mean, he's an incredible ball handler and an even better athlete.
Yeah, different players. I mean, Amen's ball skills are on another level, and we know that that's something that Asar needs to work on, but I do think Asar is a better defender, rebounder. I also think his vision, I think, and like feel is a little bit better. And I mean, they played together at OTE, and Asar was like the MVP a couple years, which doesn't mean much, but like what I mean by that is Asar has been able to like he's impacted the game in a bunch of different ways where I think Amen's going to be a tremendous lead guard in Houston if that's the role he's eventually given and runs with. But yeah, I think they're different guys, and Amen's probably a little bit more athletic, which is why he got the better draft stock coming into it. But yeah, I think they're different guys and gonna play totally different roles where they are, at least for now.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't play as strong. He's a little bit more wiry, so it's a different type of athleticism than Asar is. And that ball handling is such a difference between the two. I mean, Asar Thompson, if he's got, at least last year, if he dribbled more than about 4 times in a row, I was getting nervous. Where Amen, like the scoring potential is so much higher because you can't stop him from getting to the paint. Even
some of the
ISO.
Some of the finishes from Amen.
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure what the actual percentages are, but just in terms of like the footwork on drives and the finishing ability, like it just looks a level up from Asar in terms of
more
layups
fluid
and that
right?
kind of stuff. Yeah, more fluid, like you said, more wiry in the paint and that kind of thing. But it's okay. It still doesn't mean Asar's not unique. Like at all. Even if Amen is technically you want to say he's a better prospect, that doesn't diminish anything Asar is to the Pistons.
Agreed.
Sure. So
yeah, it's just like what would Asar be with the ball skill? No, I
how good is it? I saw this.
Oh my gosh, I do not have the contacts anything close. Like Woj is on another level. Like what that guy's job is and did, like you can't even explain it, but thank you, Derek. Maybe one day.
Derek in the live chat says he wants Blake to take over for Woj at ESPN, and you know what, Blake, I know you don't want it, but we're sacrificing you. You go do it. You go take it. You'd be great at it. You're the next one. You're next up. That's what I'm thinking.
One, that will not happen, and 2, my wife would kill me, but I appreciate it. But yeah, if Asar had Amen's like handling ability with like the vision that he has, I mean, he would be so much further ahead, which is what makes it interesting. They're different players and working on different things.
All right, let's try to get these last 2 fairly quickly, Jack. I know you got to get going in a few minutes. So this is from @DanielCK again on Twitter. It says, easier question. True. This one has a lot less backstory to it. If you could use creative player to build Cade Cunningham's running mate, that would be a number 1 or number 2 option, whatever you want. What would you do? And is there a current NBA player who seems to resemble it? Jack, I'll throw it to you first. What is the perfect like creative player running mate for Cade?
I think it would just be like a Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, like just a big wing, 2-way wing when they're in their prime. Like those guys fit with anyone, and that's kind of the beauty about Cade as well. Like I feel like Cade could even play with. This wouldn't be the ideal running mate, but you could put Cade alongside like a smaller guard like Chris Paul, and that would still be a really formidable kind of duo, I feel like, at least offensively. So, but I think just if I've already got Cade and the next type of player I want to put next to him, and I can pick anyone or create a player, like it's a wing, like a 2-way wing that can shoot and create their own shot. Like I think every team wants them. It would be interesting to see him play with like maybe. Actually, I was going to say like a Joel Embiid, but Embiid's not really a pick and roll kind of big. So, yeah, I think it's more of that bigger wing. And then you just get a rim running big, and those 3 could be pretty lethal.
Yeah, I actually went with just thinking about the backcourt here, like what guard would look good next to Cade, just because of all the Jay and Ivy discussion. And what I jotted down in my notes was just an athletic combo guard who doesn't need the ball in his hands, but can be a secondary initiator, like has good ball skills and can run a second unit, can knock down the 3, and ideally a good perimeter defender. And then I was kind of like, am I just thinking about Jaden Ivey that's a better defender? But the names that I was jotting down were like
a little, for the record, a little.
Yeah, really, it's just a more consistent 3-point shooter and a better defender. And then what I just described was Jaden Ivey. So the names I jotted down were like KCP, which I mean, he's probably the premier 3-and-D guard option. He got paid as such the offseason. Like Alex Caruso, Marcus Smart, Drew Holiday is probably the best one, like Lou Dort. And then just thinking of some like upside plays or prospects like Dyson Daniels, who was dealt to Atlanta, and the Dejounte Murray deal could be a little interesting, like someone in that, but he needs to prove more as a shooter. And then looking ahead to the next draft, I just jotted down VJ Edgecombe. All of that to say, like all those guys had certain flaws. Like some of them need to be better shooters. Like most of them that I jotted down were already good defenders. So it's like, I was thinking to myself, should we just live with what Jaden Ivey is essentially? Like, could he be a good running mate with Cade, even if he's just in the second unit, like leading that for the long run eventually?
I mean, my answer to that would be yes, but I'm still expecting a big year, a big leap out of Ivy this year. I'm pretty excited about it. For the record, I was leaning, my head was going somewhere similar to you, Jack, because my mind jumped straight to Jason Tatum. But look, I think we're all wrong. We are all very wrong. Mr. Jones in the comment section is right. A mixture of Shaquille O'Neal and Steph Curry. Could you imagine if Shaq could shoot like Steph Curry? That is the greatest player of all time.
I mean, could that be?
That's what
Wemby?
that is.
Yeah.
No, not you need the beef there.
I know
to be Shaq, you know.
I feel like Wemby's going to be just as dominant though, defensively in a different way. But I get this. This is a crazy mix. I probably, I should have said Victor Wembanyama. Like that guy's like, and it's painful.
It'd be too painful.
It was just a few ping pong balls away.
It was more than a few.
More than a few. Yeah,
you're
more
right.
than a
It
few.
wasn't even close.
It went wrong after
ping
wrong.
pong balls away.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Blake, it was actually the most ping pong balls they could have been away from Victor Wembanyama.
What
That's
can I
very
actually?
true.
Because we're on this topic and we've been talking about Asar a fair bit, what's more painful, the Pistons falling to 5 and pretty much taking Asar Thompson, or if they had a fallen to pick? No, that is a bad question. Pick 3. I was going to say pick 2, but it's like Brandon Miller you take every day of the week. So who would you rather, Scoot Henderson or Asar? Or
Oh my
I guess
gosh.
you could have taken a man at pick 3.
That's a really tough one. I mean, because like my gut told me you just go with Scoot because like I think I was wrong, but like I had Scoot above Brandon Miller. And I mean, Scoot has a ton of time and everything, and like Brandon Miller looks incredible. But then if you take Scoot, it's like speeds up your timeline on what you have to do with like Cade and Jaden Ivey. Like, are you just bringing in another guard? So I don't know. Like maybe it worked out okay in the sense of like you let everyone else make those tough decisions and then you just take what's like left on the plate, and like because you're gonna get a good player in the top 5. I mean, unless things go terribly wrong. So I don't know. Like if they got 3rd, I would probably take Scoot and figure it out later, but that like speeds up your timeline on when you have to make decisions quickly. So it might have been okay.
Yeah, I think for me, like in the moment, I definitely would have taken Scoot. I think in hindsight, I probably would have gone with Amen, especially with how the Rockets used him last year. Like he wasn't a pure point guard. He kind of played everything 1 through 3, and he did it all extremely well. I mean, that could have been a pretty outside of the shooting. Yeah. Well, yeah, right. Outside of that shooting though, that could have been almost a ideal fit there with Cade and even potentially Jaden Ivey if you wanted to play them all the way up because he's got that defensive range to, you can move Cade Cunningham around to hide him a little bit and use Amen for that. In the moment though, like I would have taken Scoot. I'm still real high on him, but He wasn't as good last year as I would have thought.
Yeah, and I think what Derek brings up here is a
I was
great
thinking it
point. Like
too.
the year before, the Chet Paolo Jabari year, like that was like, could you imagine if Chet was on the Pistons right now? That would solve so many problems. And like Paolo gives you another initiator, already has been an all-star, even though he had similar numbers to Cade Cunningham. And like Jabari fills a lot of needs on this team too. So you still got Jaden Ivey out of this draft and Jalen Duren, but there's a lot of questions there. But I think if the ping pong balls hit another way this year too, like it's a totally different situation. Yeah, Derek brings up Keegan Murray too, the exact same thing.
Yeah. This is the year that for me was like the most painful because Chet, everyone's going to want a Chet Holmgren in the next decade because Chet's your Victor Wembanyama answer. Like,
and I
know that's kind of crazy, but he's that good. Yeah, he was hurt,
Yeah.
and so they still would have been bad and gotten a high pick the year
Yes,
following.
exactly. Like this would be a different team.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're living in ifs and buts, but
That one hurt me the most. Missing out on Chet, I was very bummed. I had him like a clear number one. Wasn't even close on my board.
I love
And for
Chet.
once I was right.
yeah.
Like it looks like I was right. But
This team's like
Man.
draft luck is why I just want for the entire, like I think this season coming up, we all just want 82 games of like reasonably competitive basketball as like a baseline. Like none of this like get to the end of March, April, and we got two-way contract guys starting. Like, but I think this is why I'm just like, just try to win every single game. No resting guys because the draft odds literally do not matter. Like Atlanta, we're in the play-in, get pick 1 this year. Like now they're unlucky because this draft class doesn't have a superstar. Well, it probably will, but probably not at number 1. Like, but just win. Like because the draft, since they changed the odds, like you can come from anywhere. Like that's just me. Like I just don't trust our luck in the draft lottery anyway.
I agree with you. It's hard,
Me
man.
too.
Like the odds are rigged against you. I mean, they're rigged against everyone, but yeah, you shouldn't be like tanking. I'm convinced a team that's in like the 5 to 10 range in the lottery is going to win it unless like, I don't know, you just like if Brooklyn gets it, they're just starting over. So
people say, well, you got Cade, but it's like we've also had the same odds for the 3 years in a row and got almost the worst possible outcome. I think in Ivy's draft we could have fallen to 6 maybe, but like yeah. Anyway,
yeah, just get into the top 4. That's all they needed. Like
I love the draft, but I'm sick of it for the Pistons. I'm over it.
all right, let's
Yeah,
no, I'm completely with you. Let's end on this one. This is from a fella. It says, hypothetical. Would you take a guaranteed championship, but Cade Cunningham leaves next year? So I'm going to change this a little bit and then throw it to you, Jack. Would you take a guaranteed NBA championship sometime in the next 6 or 7 seasons, but Cade Cunningham leaves after this year?
Yes, definitely. I've been a fan of the Pistons for 12 years now and seeing 2 winning seasons, 0 playoff wins, 2 sweeps. Like if I could see if you told me in the next, 6 or 7 years, a championship, like I don't care who's on the team, quite frankly. Like obviously I root for all these young players and want to see them win, but ultimately like I can't believe I'm here as a fan. Like love this team to death, but seriously, if you had told me in 2012 when they drafted Andre Drummond and I was getting all in on the Pistons that I would be here in 2024 and the team's at a worse position and has seen no success, I wouldn't have a response. Like it's kind of inconceivable to think that I chose this team of all 30 teams I could have chosen. And while I'm happy with that decision and I'm now here, the Pistons are like a massive part of my life. I will take anything I can get. I don't care who's wearing the jersey. Couldn't care less.
Okay, before I answer, I just had to pull up the 2012 draft to see like what other teams Jack potentially could have been a fan on. And like, I mean, right after it's not okay. Golden State picked Harrison Barnes at 7. Like, what if
Yeah.
they picked Andre Drummond and Jack was a Warriors
Man.
fan alternate?
I think at the time I remember.
One pick away.
Yeah, I remember. So that I like this. I think I've told you too this, but the Pistons were the one team I didn't want Andre to go to, and it has nothing to do with Detroit or because the Pistons in 2012, like they were. I know they had a couple of down seasons since the Billups trade, but they were very successful when I was just I was a fan of all 30 teams. Like, so it was more just like, I used to be so obsessed with courts and jerseys and I just didn't like the Pistons arena and that kind of thing. This is just a weird thing. So I wanted him to go to Portland, who they obviously took Dame, but I used to love Portland's jersey. So I was hoping he went there, but just a bit of insight. So he ended up on the Pistons, of course. And yeah, man, imagine if I was a Warriors fan. Shit.
Man, Jack, we're better off to have you though. That's the important part. You've gone through all this suffering, but we've all benefited. So really, it's a win.
Honestly, I know I've spoken a bit here, but truthfully, like I actually I am now all in on like just being the underdog. Like I actually love it. I can't wait. Like when this team tastes some success, like that joy is going to be, indescribable. Like honestly, and not last thing I'll say, like those first 3 games of last season, this is so sad. But that feeling I had after they beat the Bulls, even if we were like, in hindsight, that was just ridiculous. Like that feeling of me being like, oh my, is this team actually going to win like 35 games? Like I was like, is this what it's like? I was like, that's a feeling I haven't had for a very long time. So I'm hoping I can feel that a bit this season. I'll shut up now.
No, that was great. There was something in the air after those 3 games. But I have to say, Jack, what you just described sounds like awfully familiar to mine and you too, Wes. Like our lives as Detroit Lions fans, and we finally like experienced a playoff win and a little bit of a run last year. And I have to say, it made it that much better. So, man, the Pistons need to turn it around just for that. But I agree, it'll feel just that much better after everything that happened before. And yeah, as for like the hypothetical too, I feel like any sports fan, if you put like a championship in front of them, like you always go for that one unless like, I don't know, the other thing is like something really bad in your personal life or something like that. But like something with your team, I think Cade Cunningham can be the guy for the Pistons, but like we don't know that for sure. I guess he still has like a lot to prove that he can be the guy on a team that's competing for the play-in, the playoffs, everything like that. So, I mean, I think if you're dangling Cade getting traded or leaving or whatever with a championship, like you go for the championship because that doesn't come around all too often, as we've seen the past like 15 years. So yeah, hopefully everything can be put together, but yeah, that was a tough one, like a fun hypothetical to live in.
Yeah, give me the championship. I mean, I love Cade. I think he's going to be great. I hope he's the guy that brings it, but give me the title. That'll be fun.
But like we're being
whatever
put
players
in a
are on a winning
situation
team, you're going to become like they're going to be like
player
like. You love whoever's giving you some success. Like seriously, it's an easy one.
And seriously, no like slight on Cade. Like I feel like we were all put in a position to be like, oh yeah, I'm okay if Cade leaves, but that's really not what it is at all. It's just like the championship. You can't like. There's so few things that you can put in front that you probably don't go for that option.
Before we close it out, Jack, I didn't realize as you were explaining your Pistons fandom story, I didn't realize how much I related to you until Blake, you brought up the Lions, because I remember when I was real young, I grew up in Chicago. All right. So we were Lions fans. And because my dad and I, we really didn't care too much about baseball, we were also Cubs fans. And if you know anything about the history of the Chicago Cubs in the 2000s, not good. All right. So you had the Lions were crap, the Cubs were crap. And Dad basically told me, like, all right, we got to pick. Like, we can't do both of these. We'll either be Tigers fans because the Tigers are good right now, or we'll be Colts fans instead of Lions fans because I loved the Colts as well with Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, all those guys. Well, we chose the Lions and the Tigers, and good Lord, was that a mistake? Not only did the Colts win a Super Bowl, but the Cubs went and won a World Series. Like, I missed out on two. So
Your
just like
time
you were
is
one
coming.
away from a dynasty. But yeah, now
Can
the
I
Lions
ask
are
with
good,
the-
so I'm rooting for it.
With the Lions, is it just this constant feeling of like, I'm just waiting for this all to fall apart? Like, because you're not used
Not
to
anymore.
any success? Or you've, was that maybe last season, or now you buy into them?
2
being
years
the-
ago.
Yeah, okay.
2
It
years ago
felt-
for me, when they
Yeah.
were going on a run on the back half of that season 2 years ago, I was kind of like, all right, when is the roof going to fall down? But then when they ended the season beating Green Bay in the cold and Lambeau Field, I was like, okay, yeah, it's different now. We're good.
Yeah, and they would just like for so many years lose games in the most tremendous ways, like some that weren't even their fault. So for me, like it felt like it was different, yes, but I did not think that they would win a playoff game until I actually saw it happen because it's like one game elimination. So I was scared.
I was
going,
so confident, Blake. I was
really, I was and it was
ridiculously
their old
confident,
quarterback coming in, like just because of that. So I'd like to say that you'll know when it feels different, but like especially for the Lions, it just like thinking that they wouldn't pull it out kind of stayed through with me until they actually did.
We need Peyton Manning to go get probably Big Sean and like exercise Little Caesars Arena because that seemed to work for the Lions when it was Jeff Daniels and did the whole exorcism in Ford
Oh
Field.
my
We need
God.
that for the Pistons. Let's get that going. Someone schedule that. I know all the important people listen to our podcast. Someone's got to do that.
I love it.
All
Right. Jack, I
Yeah.
know you got to get going. We appreciate the extra time you gave us today. So, man, thank you. Again, we love having you on. Tell the people everywhere they can find you, everywhere they can find your stuff, and where they need to be watching. Maybe we need, Twitter notifications for Pistons Jack and anticipating
they're
this
off
big
for
news,
Woj.
Exactly.
No,
yeah, you got space.
I appreciate you guys. I always love jumping on and talking Pistons. I am excited for this season. I didn't think I would get to this point after what we witnessed last year, but I am slowly building back into my crazed excitement. Whether or not this team wins 30 games, I don't really care. I'm just excited for Pistons Hoops to be back. So thank you for having me on. You can follow me on Twitter at Pistons_Jack. And then, Pistons Intellect on YouTube with some changes coming soon. But thanks so much for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Jack, again for joining us. Always love having you on, and really enjoyed the Pistons origin story. I really like looking through to see like where else you could have went if things went differently that night. But happy that the Pistons got you, and shout out to everyone for joining us live and listening on your podcast feed. A reminder, you can call our phone line to ask a question, hear your voice on the show. The number for that is 313-355-2717. And if you're watching on YouTube, if you can hit the like button and subscribe to the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, that'll really help us move things along here. And special thanks to our guy, Sean Court, the managing editor of Detroit Bad Boys, for supporting the show. Shout out to you guys again for the great questions and talking points. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.